Imagine doing everything exactly the way your dad taught you. You know, you were picking her up at her door, you're paying for the dinners, you're pulling out her chair, you're being the absolute perfect gentleman, you're texting her back immediately so she never has to guess where you stand, and you still get ghosted. Meanwhile, there is a guy out there who literally plans a date on a dirty park bench, shows up in gym shorts, and tells her to go home after 30 minutes because he's tired. And she is obsessing over him. She's staring at her phone right now, analyzing his read receipts, wondering why he isn't calling. You're probably listening to this in your car or at the gym right now, thinking about a text you sent 3 hours ago that's still left on read, wondering if you should double text. If you take away anything today, let it be the mechanics of why that happens.
It is arguably the single most frustrating reality for a man trying to navigate the modern dating ecosystem. I mean, we see the fallout from this every single day. There's a glaring, almost absurd disconnect in the market right now. You have this incredibly loud chorus of women online and in social circles complaining about being ghosted, being treated as disposable, and constantly asking where all the good, intentional men have gone. But when you look clinically under the hood, when you isolate the data on who exactly they are getting ignored by and why they're getting ignored, it completely inverts everything men are traditionally taught about attraction, courtship, and human behavior.
That's the part that drives guys absolutely insane, right? The mixed signaling. Because if you were sitting there wondering why playing the traditional nice guy checklist game is leaving you frustrated and invisible, you have to understand the psychological machinery operating on the other side of the screen. We have to impartially deconstruct what is actually happening here, because by the end of this conversation, you're going to understand the underlying neurobiology and sociology of why that traditional playbook is essentially a trap in the digital age, and how the guys who fundamentally understand market dynamics are navigating this space completely unbothered.
Right, and to do that properly, we have to start by dismantling the illusion of basic standards. This is the foundational trap. Men are incredibly logical creatures by nature. So when a man listens to what a woman explicitly says she wants, he treats it like a blueprint. He looks at her stated checklist, and he tries to systematically mold his life and his behavior to meet those exact specifications.
Yeah, I see this constantly. A guy will come in incredibly frustrated and bring up a situation where a female friend or, a woman he's pursuing is claiming her standards are just so low. We've all seen this. She's literally losing sleep, crying to her friends over brunch, wondering if she's going to die alone because she just can't find a guy who meets what she calls an incredibly basic baseline. Let's look at the specific checklist we hear all the time. I call it the good Christian girl checklist, but you see variations of it everywhere.
Lay out the exact parameters of the checklist for a second. What is she explicitly asking for?
Okay, so she says she wants a guy with a sense of humor. That's always number one, right? She likes to laugh, she wants banter, she doesn't take herself too seriously. Second, she wants him to be financially stable. And she always qualifies this to sound super reasonable. She'll say, look, I'm not asking for a mansion in the hills. I just want a guy who has no credit card debt. Maybe he rents a nice clean apartment. He has a 401k. Because I rent a nice apartment and I live a humble, responsible life. And third, she wants a God-fearing Christian man, or at least a man with highly structured traditional values. She wants to be, as they say, equally yoked. That's the entire list. Humor, a clean balance sheet, and good moral values. And she is completely baffled as to why she is single in her early 30s.
Now, if you are a mathematically average guy in your late 20s or 30s listening to this, you're experiencing intense cognitive dissonance right now. You're thinking, wait a second, I have a salaried job, I pay my rent on time, I don't have crippling consumer debt, I go to church, or I volunteer, or I at least have a solid moral compass, and I can hold a conversation and make a joke. So if her standards are truly that accessible, why isn't my phone ringing? Why am I struggling to get a single match on Hinge?
Exactly, because statistically, most men in their 30s easily clear that bar. That is not a rare top 1% profile. It's just the profile of the average functioning adult male. So what is the disconnect here? Why is she on the internet complaining that this man just doesn't exist?
Because she is fundamentally leaving out the silent, unspoken multiplier. It is the core filter that must be passed before the rest of the checklist is even evaluated. She is leaving out the requirement of raw, visceral, physical, and sexual attraction.
The biological spark.
Exactly. She doesn't just want a guy with a clean apartment and a sense of humor. She wants all of those wholesome, stable provider traits only housed within the vessel of a top-tier, highly physically attractive man.
Hold on, let me play devil's advocate here for a second. Because isn't it perfectly normal to want physical attraction. I mean, we aren't hypocrites here, right? And men want to be wildly attracted to the women they date, too. You shouldn't have to settle for someone you have zero physical chemistry with. Surely emotional connection and shared values eventually override a preference for a guy who is 6'2" with a crazy jawline. I mean, we've all seen guys who aren't exactly fitness models land incredible women because they just have unmatched charisma.
You're confusing long-term pair bonding mechanics with initial filtering mechanics on modern dating platforms. Yes, it is absolutely normal and biologically necessary to desire physical attraction. The problem isn't that she wants to be attracted. The problem is the reality of the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule operating on modern dating apps. The level of men she finds highly attractive, the guys who give her that immediate cinematic dopamine spike, the top 10 to 20% of men, they have options, an overwhelming amount of options.
Yeah, they really do.
And those highly desirable guys, the ones who actually pass her initial physical filter, they aren't looking for her in a serious, committed way.
Right, because their algorithm looks entirely different.
Yeah. Entirely different. They aren't looking to settle down into a humble apartment and merge credit scores with a woman just because she also pays her rent on time. They have the option to just take her out, have a fun night, experience the intimacy, and move on to the next match. The market is highly efficient. She is completely passing over the thousands of men who actually possess the exact character traits she claims to be crying over, because she lacks that immediate spark with them.
She swipes left instantly.
Exactly. And the guys she does have this spark with, well, they just want casual access. So she experiences this cycle of getting pumped and dumped by the highly attractive guy, and then her ego protects itself by projecting the blame outward, claiming that men with good values simply don't exist anymore. They absolutely exist. She just swiped left on them because they were 5'9" and wore cargo shorts in their profile picture.
It's like waiting in line for 3 hours at a Michelin star restaurant, only to be served a single dry cracker, and convincing yourself it's a culinary masterpiece just because of the chef's brand name. The brand, or in this case, his physical aesthetic, is completely overriding her actual experience of how she's being treated. Meanwhile, there's a hearty, home-cooked meal sitting right across the street, but she won't walk in because the awning isn't trendy enough.
That is a perfect analogy. And the actionable takeaway for the man listening is this. You have to stop trying to logically qualify yourself to a woman by submitting your resume. You cannot negotiate genuine desire if that baseline raw attraction isn't established first. Showing her your bank account, your clean apartment, or your good values is entirely useless. It's like trying to sell the incredible safety features of a minivan to someone who fundamentally only wants to drive a sports car. You can talk about the airbags, the crash test ratings, and the gas mileage all day long. If she doesn't feel a visceral pull toward the vehicle, your lack of credit card debt is not going to suddenly manufacture a biological spark.
I completely agree. You cannot negotiate desire. And that naturally begs the question of what actually happens when she does get the sports car. Let's look at the psychology of what happens when women actually match with these highly desirable top-tier guys. Because this is where the behavioral dynamic gets truly fascinating and where a lot of guys completely misinterpret the data. I want to break down a specific scenario we see variations of all the time. Let's look at a woman in her early 30s, say 32 years old, who matches with a guy on an app. And he is exactly what she wants.
He gets the physical filters.
Right. He's 6'2". He works out, but he's got that specific build a lot of women love right now. That imposing, perfect mix of muscle and a little bulk, like an NFL offensive lineman.
Yeah.
He's got a lucrative career. He owns a house. And he even understands the modern social nuances. He puts something like feminism and human rights in his profile to signal that he's socially aware and safe.
He's the apex profile. He checks every single biological and sociological box for the modern 30-something woman.
Exactly. So they match. The dopamine is rushing. Right off the bat, his communication is smooth. He compliments her. He validates her. He says he loves that they have the same hobbies and that they both prioritize fitness. The vibe is objectively great. And then, just 3 or 4 messages in, he asks to trade pictures. Now, she gets defensive. Her guard goes up and she decides to test him. She jokes around, but with a sharp edge, sending something like, "Are you kidding? This isn't 2016. What are we doing? I'd like to meet in person first before we talk about doing that."
And how does he respond to that friction?
He doesn't. He immediately blocks her. Boom. Gone. Unmatched. The conversation is permanently erased.
Now, let's analyze that from the perspective of the average guy. A lot of guys looking at that text exchange would think, whoa, didn't he completely fumble the bag? Why block her so aggressively fast over a harmless joke? He had her on the hook. All he had to do was say, haha, fair enough, let's grab coffee tomorrow, and he could have closed the deal later. Why be so impatient?
I'm with them on this one. I mean, from a purely strategic standpoint, wasn't it a fumble? Couldn't he just play along for 5 minutes to secure the date? I feel like an unforced error on his part.
It feels like an unforced error if you are operating from a mindset of scarcity. But we have to look at the neurobiology of abundance. This man didn't fumble anything. He executed a flawless sorting mechanism. He exercised his options. A guy in his early 30s who has his life together, who owns a home, who is physically imposing, and who knows how to communicate. He fundamentally understands his exact market value. Because his dating app algorithm is flooded with matches, his dopamine receptors have shifted. He has absolutely zero tolerance for friction.
Zero tolerance.
Right. He asked for something simple. He set a frame. She decided to introduce resistance. She tried to negotiate his frame, test his boundaries, and make him jump through a hoop to prove his worth. And he simply looked at that friction, calculated that it wasn't worth his time, and removed her from his reality.
It's the psychology of absolute self-respect, but it's also a demonstration of leverage. He isn't going to jump through hoops, and he certainly isn't going to let a woman he matched with 10 minutes ago talk down to him or lecture him about what year it is.
Precisely. We have to deconstruct her specific language in that scenario. This isn't 2016. What are we doing? That is a shaming tactic. She was trying to publicly, or at least interpersonally, shame him. She was adopting the posture of a teacher scolding a misbehaving student. A high-value man does not accept being scolded by a woman he barely knows. He has an abundance of women in his queue who will happily trade pictures with him, engage in playful banter, and make the interaction seamless and fun without the moral lecture. So he respects his own time enough to walk away instantly.
He essentially clears the path. He's non-verbally communicating, okay, you want to play games, create artificial resistance, and act like the prize. I respect your boundary, and I'm removing my presence. Go find a lesser guy you can manipulate and talk down to. I'm going to go talk to the girl who actually makes this easy.
And this is exactly why building baseline confidence and cultivating a genuine abundance mindset is so critical for men today. When you operate from a place of scarcity, when your neurobiology genuinely believes this is the only attractive woman who will match with you this month, you tolerate the scolding. You absorb the disrespect. You backpedal and say, oh, you're right. I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have asked that. Let's just get coffee. And the devastating irony is, the second you submit to her frame and apologize for your own desire, she loses all biological respect for you anyway. You lose the interaction the moment you apologize for being a man with intent.
Which is exactly why so many guys end up over-investing in the early stages and getting nowhere. They lack a structured methodology to handle these initial interactions, so they guess. They hesitate. They try to accommodate every little shit test a woman throws at them. If someone wants a more structured roadmap for that, that's actually something stealth attraction does quite well. I like that it gives guys a step-by-step framework instead of leaving them to guess. They learn how to confidently lead the interaction, set the frame, and more importantly, they learn the behavioral cues of when to just walk away if the vibe isn't right without getting emotionally triggered.
Having a framework like that is crucial because it acts as a guardrail against acting like a dancing monkey trying to earn her approval. The 6'2" guy in our example didn't try to earn a single thing. He stated his intent, she resisted, he left, he maintained his power, he didn't get angry, he didn't call her names, he just removed his attention.
And that completely short-circuits her brain, because she is entirely accustomed to average guys who will move mountains and suffer endless disrespect just for a sliver of her attention. She wants a guy who has the high value, the house, the physical presence of a lumberjack, but who will also submit to her, let her talk down to him, and let her control the pacing of the courtship. She wants a biological contradiction, and the market is coldly telling her no.
And that leads to a deeply fascinating psychological paradox. Because when these women do manage to get one of these top-tier guys to actually meet up with them in the real world, the dynamic is completely backwards from what a traditional nice guy would ever expect or tolerate.
Oh, this is the most baffling part of the modern dating landscape for the average guy to observe. We have to talk about the phenomenon of the zero-effort date. So what happens when a guy with endless options actually does agree to see a woman? Listen to this scenario, because this is happening in every major city right now. A woman gets invited out. She spends 2 hours getting ready, does her hair, her makeup, maybe buys a new outfit. The guy plans absolutely nothing. They meet up, and they sit on a concrete park bench outside for 30 minutes. He is wearing gym shorts and a hoodie. He doesn't buy her a coffee. He doesn't take her to dinner. He literally asks her what her favorite snacks and drinks are while they just sit there on the bench looking at the street.
He's conducting market research for a future hangout at best.
Right. And she is sitting there on this dirty bench enduring this, assuming that this is just the pregame. She is convincing herself they're going to eventually head to a movie or a cool hidden speakeasy or a nice restaurant. Instead, after 30 minutes, he just looks at her, stretches, and says, "Well, you can go home now. I went out all last week. I'm tired. I don't really feel like doing anything else."
Just, you can go home now? It's
Yes.
incredible. It's almost sociopathic in its bluntness.
It's brutal, and she is left completely shell-shocked. She goes home, makes a TikTok video complaining about how modern men have no manners, they don't know how to court women, they don't know how to plan dates, they are selfish and rude. But the real question you have to ask as an impartial observer is, how does a guy get a woman to leave her house, spend hours on her appearance, and show up to a location with zero plans and zero effort? How does he mathematically pull that off?
He pulls it off because of the halo effect and hypergamy. She showed up blindly, driven entirely by raw, overwhelming physical attraction. She didn't vet his personality. She didn't vet his character or his capacity for empathy. She didn't hold out for him to prove he was a gentleman or that he had a plan. She just saw a highly attractive man who gave her a neurochemical rush, and she went running the second he dropped a pin on a map. The cognitive dissonance occurs because she is trying to map the behavior of a provider onto the physical body of a casual player.
That is such a bitter pill to swallow for the guy who is trying to do things right. Guys, if you are out here spending $300 on a first date, agonizing over the Yelp reviews of a tapas restaurant, trying desperately to impress a woman, just know that there is a guy she finds incredibly attractive who she will happily sit on a dirty park bench for in the freezing cold just for the privilege of being in his physical presence.
We call this the illusion of boyfriend energy. Women get incredibly upset that these highly attractive men, these top-tier guys with endless optionality, don't project boyfriend energy. They try to forcefully convert a guy who is clearly treating them like a casual, low-effort option into a committed, romantic planning partner. They fall victim to the sunk cost fallacy. They think, well, I'm already here on the bench. If I just act cool, if I'm just agreeable and don't make a fuss, eventually he'll see my value and take me on a real date.
It's like buying a $2 scratch-off lottery ticket and getting furiously angry that it didn't pay out steady, reliable quarterly dividends like a municipal bond. You bought a scratch-off. You knew what it was when you bought it. And he won't change because a fair exchange isn't a robbery. He knows exactly what he brings to the table. He's offering his time and his highly desirable physical presence. If she accepts those asymmetrical terms, that's entirely on her.
Exactly. And the trade-off here is the most fascinating sociological aspect, because the alternative for her is readily available. The alternative is getting with a guy who genuinely cares about her, who values her time, who plans real structured dates, who opens her doors and respects her intellect. But she actively, consistently chooses not to do that. She would genuinely rather feel invisible, anxious, and disrespected by the highly attractive guy than allow a slow-burn attraction to grow over time with a solid, reliable, slightly less aesthetic guy.
Because in her mind, to accept the reliable guy is to admit defeat. It's a strike against her ego. It's to admit she cannot permanently lock down the top-tier guy. So she keeps running face first into the wall, trying to tame the lion, getting told to go home after 30 minutes, and then going on the internet to complain that all men are trash and nobody wants to go on real dates anymore.
Men want to go on real dates. The men she is rejecting want to go on real dates. The men she is chasing do not need to. It is purely supply and demand. The market forces dictate the behavior.
It really is that cold and mathematical. And to show the stark contrast, we need to look at what happens when a guy actually does put in the effort, but he keeps his eyes open and recognizes a bad deal when he sees one. This brings us to the entitlement trap and how people test boundaries. I want to spend some serious time deconstructing this story because it is an absolute masterclass in how a man should handle his own value and navigate manipulative reciprocity. Let's look at the airport chauffeur scenario.
This one is incredibly common, and it highlights a psychological concept called covert contracts. Walk us through the specific timeline of the courtship here.
All right, so picture this. A guy and a girl have been dating for a little over a month. And this guy is doing everything right by the traditional playbook. He is a complete, undeniable gentleman. He lives about 30 minutes away from her, but he always makes the drive to her fancier side of town. He navigates the traffic, he picks her up, he opens the car doors, he pays for the meals at nice restaurants. There's never been an argument. Everything seems perfect and highly intentional.
He is heavily investing up front. He is deploying time, financial resources, and logistics to demonstrate his value as a potential long-term partner.
Exactly. Now, a few weeks in, he has to go on a work trip. She offers to take him to the airport, which sounds like a lovely reciprocal gesture, right? But here's the catch. She lets him park his car in her apartment building's secure garage, and she uses her own personal key card to swipe him in so he avoids paying the expensive daily airport parking fees while he's gone.
Okay, let's pause right there and dissect this. Because most guys hear that and think, oh, wow, what a great girl. She's so sweet. She's saving me money. She's contributing to the dynamic. But there's a very specific, often subconscious psychology behind unsolicited favors early in a relationship.
Hold on, I have to challenge that. Isn't she just trying to be a team player? Why assume malicious intent here? It seems incredibly cynical to view a girl saving you $100 in parking as some kind of trap.
It's not conscious malice. I'm not saying she is sitting in a dark room rubbing her hands together like a comic book villain. It is a subconscious safety mechanism based on evolutionary psychology. Look, when a woman follows your lead and cooperates with your plans, that shows she is on your program. She respects your leadership. But when a woman starts doing things outside of your instructions, like volunteering her garage key card to save you money without you asking, it is very often the creation of a covert contract. It is a way to manufacture leverage.
Okay, that makes sense.
She is doing a favor that you didn't ask for, and in her mind, she is purchasing future compliance. She expects that favor to guarantee that you will jump through hoops for her later. It's an emotional investment strategy masked as altruism.
A covert contract. Basically, the unspoken rule in her head is, I saved you $100 in parking, therefore you owe me infinite chauffeur duties and emotional validation in the future. On my terms.
Exactly. The human brain uses reciprocal altruism as a survival tool. But when it's weaponized in dating, it becomes manipulative. And watch how quickly the contract is called in.
It plays out almost immediately. So he gets back from his trip. After a few weeks, the dynamic shifts slightly. The guy stops initiating calls and texts quite as often. He still talks to her when she reaches out. The conversations are good. He doesn't rush her off the phone. He's perfectly polite. But he's not chasing her every morning with a good morning, beautiful text. When she jokingly complains, saying something like, oh, you must not like me anymore, you never call me, he calmly explains his reality. He tells her his work schedule is ramped up, he's on call, he's hustling, he's focused on his career.
This is a classic behavioral test.
Yeah.
She is feeling the anxiety of him pulling back slightly and focusing on his purpose. And how she reacts to a man's focus on his purpose is the ultimate red flag test for long-term viability. When a woman genuinely respects you and genuinely desires you, she respects your work schedule. She instinctively understands that a man needs to build his kingdom and secure resources. She falls back. She becomes a soft place to land. She doesn't demand your attention or act entitled to it just because she let you use her parking pass 3 weeks ago.
But she doesn't fall back. She ramps up the entitlement. She goes on her own trip shortly after this. And this guy, still operating as the gentleman, steps up again. He drives the 30 minutes to her place, picks her up, drives her all the way to the airport. He opens the doors. He handles the heavy luggage. He even takes the time to peel the old, sticky airport tags off her suitcases so she doesn't have an issue at check-in. Pure, top-tier, detail-oriented gentleman behavior.
He is clearly demonstrating that he is capable of protecting her and providing seamless logistics. He is showing high evolutionary fitness.
Right. But here comes the friction. When she gets to her destination airport, her flight back gets delayed, not just a little bit. We're talking a massive 6 or 7 hour delay. She's calling him, texting him updates, but it's getting incredibly late. And he goes to bed early because he has to be at work the next morning. So he misses her late night calls.
Which is perfectly reasonable. He has a life. He has a career. He is a provider, not her 24/7 on-call emotional support animal.
Well, she absolutely does not see it that way. The next day, he doesn't immediately apologize profusely for falling asleep. He just keeps going with his life and his work. Her whole trip goes by. And now she's flying back home. The day before she leaves, he texts to ask what time she gets in. She says 7 p.m. He looks at his schedule and tells her straight up, I can't come get you. I have to go to work and I'm going to be stuck in traffic.
A completely valid logical boundary.
Yeah.
His purpose and his livelihood come first.
And this is the absolute breaking point. She texts him back and says, okay, that's fine. You want to just get my Uber. And when he sends a confused gif back because he's entirely caught off guard by the demand, she hits him with the ultimate disrespect. She texts, what's the problem? You can't afford it.
Wow. There it is. The mask slips completely.
The guy immediately ghosts her, completely walks away, never speaks to her again. So my question to you, from a clinical expert standpoint, was this guy just using her? Did he take the free parking, get a few free meals out of it, and then bail when it got inconvenient to be her boyfriend?
Absolutely not. He wasn't using her. He was observing her. This guy brilliantly clocked that she was a liability, not an asset, and he executed a flawless exit strategy. Let's break down the behavioral cues here, because every guy listening needs to recognize this pattern of covert narcissism. This man drove to her, paid for dates, handled her luggage, drove her to the airport. He demonstrated massive value, effort, and resource allocation. The very first second, he couldn't execute a task for her because of his actual career, the very thing that allows him to be a provider. She didn't say, "Oh, I understand. You work hard. I'll grab a cab. See you this weekend." She insulted his resources. She tried to shame his masculinity and his evolutionary fitness by asking if he was too broke to pay for her ride.
Can you afford my Uber? It's such a specific, venomous insult. It's not just asking for a favor. It's explicitly designed to attack a man's pride as a provider. It's a direct strike at his competence.
Exactly. And what she fundamentally didn't realize is that highly capable men do not tolerate being shamed. The second she sent that text, his respect for her evaporated on a cellular level. He realized she didn't value him as a human being. She valued what he could do for her. She saw him as a utility, an ATM with a steering wheel. And remember that garage key card? This is the exact moment she tried to cash in the covert contract. In her mind, because she did that one unprompted favor a month ago, he was permanently indebted to her, and she felt justified in demanding he pay for her transportation.
And he completely refused to play the game.
He completely refused. He didn't argue. He didn't text back a screenshot of his bank account to prove he could afford an Uber. He didn't defend himself or call her entitled. He just permanently removed his presence. That is the ultimate display of frame control. When a woman insults you, you do not argue. You remove your attention, which is your most valuable asset.
It's so powerful. And she is left completely stunned, going online to complain that she was ghosted by a guy who she thought was a gentleman. She literally cannot compute that her own entitlement, her own covert contracts, and her own toxic communication style is what drove him away. She casts him as the villain in her narrative.
They almost always cast themselves as the victim of a random, unprovoked ghosting. But men who are building a life don't just randomly walk away after a month of paying for everything and driving an hour round trip. They walk away because they hit a hard boundary of disrespect and realize the return on investment is fundamentally negative.
This entitlement, this profound lack of self-awareness, it really thrives in the current digital ecosystem. Let's broaden the scope a bit to the dating apps themselves, because this is where the delusions are manufactured and sustained. We call this phenomenon Hinge purgatory, and it perfectly highlights the two completely different sets of rules that men and women play by in the modern algorithmic market.
Hinge purgatory. It's a dark, cyclical place. Set the scene for us.
All right, so you have a woman who has been on Hinge for so long that she is genuinely embarrassed to open the app in public. She's swiping one night and she sees a guy on there. Let's call him Bob. She recognizes Bob from years ago when she first made her account. She's thinking, oh my God, Bob is still here. Bob probably knows I'm still here. This is so embarrassing. We're both still single. We're both failures in the market.
She's projecting her own sense of failure onto Bob's existence.
Exactly. Now, around the same time, another guy she liked and went on a date with a year ago suddenly matches with her again, claiming he hasn't checked the app in a year. She immediately unmatches him. Why? Because, in her own words, she doesn't need the painful, visceral reminder that she has been single and swiping for a whole year while he probably went off, had a whole relationship, broke up, and then came back. She compares being on Hinge to being at last call at 5 a.m. at a dive bar, just desperately waiting to find someone to go home with before the lights turn on. It's the feeling of getting passed around, passed over, and it's deeply humiliating for her.
The honesty in her assessment of her own feelings is actually striking, but her interpretation of the market dynamics is completely flawed. She thinks she and Bob are in the same boat. They're absolutely not in the same boat. Men and women experience time on dating apps under entirely different mathematical formulas.
That's a bold claim. Walk me through the mechanics of that. What is the truth about Bob? Why are they experiencing the app so differently?
The truth about Bob is that if a man has been on a dating app for years, and he's a reasonably attractive, successful, established guy, he isn't stuck in purgatory at all. He is cleaning up. He is running through matches, having his fun, casually dating, and maintaining a massive roster of options. He's at an all-you-can-eat buffet. His market value as a man, his income, his confidence, his lifestyle is likely stable or increasing as he ages through his 30s. If she is still on the app for years, she isn't at the buffet. She is the fish getting caught, inspected, and repeatedly thrown back into the water by the top-tier men.
Ouch.
I know it sounds incredibly cynical to some listeners, but it's based on the sociological reality of what the algorithm actually rewards. The market heavily values youth and novelty in female profiles, and the longer she is on there, the more her value depreciates in the eyes of the top 10% of men who have already seen her profile 100 times. Bob's value as a provider, a protector, or even just a confident guy in his 30s is compounding.
Exactly. And let's critically look at the guy who hit her up after a year-long break. She actually got the mechanics half right. He probably did go have a relationship, or more likely, he's just doing this for sport. His new flow of matches dried up for the week. The algorithm throttled his profile, so he's circling back to his old queue, rattling the cages to see who is still available and desperate enough to reply. He is operating from a position of absolute power and boredom. She is operating from a position of shame and scarcity. She even admits it's embarrassing. And in the very same breath, she complains about getting ghosted by 2 other guys in a single week. One guy reschedules a Saturday night date to a Sunday afternoon coffee, then ghosts her completely. Another guy offers to take her out and teach her golf on a Wednesday, but when she texts to confirm the time, he ignores her, so she blocks him to protect her ego. She's just catching loss after loss, week after week.
And you have to impartially ask yourself why. Why is a woman who explicitly admits she is embarrassed and feels like she's at last call at 5 a.m. still getting ghosted by guys who are actively offering to take her golfing? Because she is stubbornly holding out for a tier of men that she fundamentally cannot lock down for commitment. Look at the discrepancy between dating app marketing and user behavior. If you watch a Hinge ad on TV right now, what do the couples look like?
They look like completely normal, everyday people. The guy has a bit of a dad bod. Maybe his hairline is receding a little. He's wearing a quirky, comfortable sweater. The girl is cute but average, maybe wearing glasses. They are laughing over a spilled drink. The ads are heavily leaning into personality, shared values, and mundane compatibility.
Exactly. The corporations running these apps possess all the data, and they are actively trying to signal to their users, look, lower your physical expectations and focus on baseline compatibility, or you will churn out of the app. But women on these apps are completely ignoring that corporate messaging.
Yeah.
They're stubbornly holding out for top-shelf aesthetic models, the 6'2", sharp jawline, six-pack guys, and those top men are the ones making things happen. They're the ones scheduling the golf dates, and then when a younger or more attractive option comes along on Tuesday night, they just ghost the girl on Wednesday. Because they can. The algorithm allows them to.
The women who hold out for perfection end up feeling passed around and used, while the guys with the dad bods and the quirky sweaters, the guys who would actually treat them well, plan the dates, and not ghost them on a Wednesday, are completely invisible to them.
It is an entirely self-inflicted purgatory driven by algorithmic delusion. The women are trying to be picky with the absolute top-tier men, but they lack the leverage to make demands of those men. They want the guy to be a fitness model, have a huge income, plan a perfect thematic date, and tolerate their bad attitudes and tests. The math simply doesn't work. The equation is broken.
Which perfectly hooks into one final mindset flaw that ties this entire ecosystem together. And this might be the most arrogant, psychologically fascinating coping mechanism we see in the modern dating market. Let's talk about the second chance delusion and the shifting reality of the market.
Oh, this one is fascinating because it's pure ego preservation.
We see women literally going online, furious, broadcasting stories like this to their followers. They say, I gave this guy a second chance to meet my needs. We had a serious conversation about what I require in a partnership. He followed through for one single day and then went silent again. I'm deleting him. Men are so annoying. Why can't I find a good man who is consistent and intentional? These grown men are acting like little boys.
I gave him a second chance. The sheer, unadulterated arrogance of that framing is astounding. Let's completely deconstruct this because it is the root of so much male frustration and confusion. When you strip away the ego, who is really giving who a chance here?
Right. She frames the narrative as if she is the grand prize sitting on a velvet throne, bestowing a rare golden opportunity upon a lowly peasant.
But look at how modern women functionally treat dating. They treat it like building a Frankenstein monster or a Mr. Potato Head. They want to extract the physical looks from the guy at the gym, the financial resources from the older executive, the emotional availability and endless patience of a licensed therapist, and the exciting danger of a bad boy. They want to Frankenstein a perfect, contradictory man. But if you strip away the demand for top 1% physical looks, if you just look at what women historically and biologically claim they need for survival, security, and happiness, most average, hardworking men can provide, protect, and build a solid life.
I agree. Most men inherently want to provide and protect. It's built into our evolutionary hardware. A guy wants a purpose, he wants a family to provide for.
Exactly. Therefore, if a man has gathered resources, achieved stability, and is expressing a willingness to commit those resources to one woman, he is the one offering the chance. He is giving a woman the opportunity to reap the lifelong benefits of his hard work, his physical protection, and his legacy.
That is a massive paradigm shift for a lot of guys to hear. Men are the ones offering the tangible, real-world value, the mortgage, the physical security, the financial stability, the fatherhood. But they have been socially conditioned and brainwashed into believing they have to beg a woman to accept those gifts.
And that paradigm shift is the grand awakening we are seeing right now in the market. Confident, capable men are waking up from the conditioning. They are looking around and realizing, wait a minute, I make good money. I'm fiercely loyal. I take care of my physical health. I'm a good man. Why am I letting a woman who brings nothing to the table but a bad attitude, a history of casual flings, and massive entitlement tell me she has given me a chance? Men do not want to be given a chance by a woman who clearly feels like she is settling for them.
They want a woman who sees them the exact same way they see themselves. If she doesn't see your value, if she views you as a consolation prize, you don't argue with her. You don't try to prove your worth by buying her more dinners. You just tell her to keep walking.
Which leaves these women completely bewildered. They're online calling men boys because the men won't submit to their unreasonable demands. But the clinical reality is the men are acting like mature men by setting firm boundaries, assessing risk, and walking away from a bad emotional investment.
It reminds me of the most visceral analogy for the modern dating market. It's the late to the party concept. Imagine a massive, incredible house party. Women are showing up late to this party. They walk through the front doors at 2 a.m. and they look around. The music is turned off. The lights are glaringly bright. The good men, the men who build, the men who provide, the men who commit, they arrived at the party hours ago, right when it started. They found the good, cooperative women. They paired off and they went home to build families and businesses.
Or they realized the party was lame, toxic, and overpriced, and they just left to go focus on their careers, their fitness, and their peace of mind.
Exactly. So this woman in her early 30s walks into this empty, sticky floored room. There are only two people left in the corner. There's some popcorn backwash on the floor. There's one warm, stunky beer left in the 12-pack. And she looks around, furious, puts her hands on her hips, and asks, "Where are all the good men? This party sucks. The organizers of this party are terrible."
And the brutal, impartial truth of the market is the good men are behind you.
Yeah.
You passed them up years ago. When you were 24 and you were chasing the club promoter or the aspiring DJ who treated you terribly, the good men were the guys you friend-zoned because they were quietly studying engineering or working night shifts and they didn't have a motorcycle or a six-pack. Now those guys are 34, they're making massive salaries, they are in shape, they have a house, and they're married to a woman who actually appreciated their potential when they were still building it.
By the time these women wake up to this reality and decide they are finally ready for the good guy, those men have leveled up. Their options are looking much, much better. But for the women, the leverage they once had is entirely gone. The market has shifted beneath their feet while they weren't paying attention.
The market always, inevitably, corrects itself. That is the core sociological philosophy here. You cannot cheat the laws of supply and demand, and you cannot cheat evolutionary biology forever. If you are a man listening to this and you are quietly building your value, establishing strong, unbreakable boundaries, and proving you are willing to walk away from entitlement like the guy who impartially refused to pay for the Uber or the guy who blocked the girl over the picture test without a second thought, you are positioning yourself on the winning side of history. The market is currently shifting heavily in your favor, provided you have the discipline to maintain your frame.
The panic and desperation you see from women online right now, the endless videos begging for men to be intentional and stop ghosting, it's just a symptom of that massive market correction. The power dynamic is flipping entirely. So I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to chew on as you go about your week. Next time a female friend or a date tells you her dating life is an absolute disaster, that she's constantly getting ghosted and that all men are trash, well, look at the situation impartially and ask yourself something. Is she really the tragic victim of a broken, toxic dating market? Or is she just furious that average, hardworking men have finally woken up and started raising their prices?